We are going to talk about being still today. And dads are geniuses when it comes to finding ways to carve out quiet times, aren't we? I thought this was pretty smart. Mom's face, but you're the physical holding the child, and you can still be on your phone. I did something similar with my children, and Sam's not here today. He's traveling today, so I can talk about him. I've always told my children I won't talk about them too much without their permission, but he's not going to see this. So Stephen and I would be playing video games because Stephen was 2 years older, and Sam would come up, and he was in his diapers, right? And so he was like wanting to play with us, but I knew that he would like wreck whatever game we were playing. So I handed him an old Xbox controller that was disconnected. And so he would just sit there and jam on those buttons. And I'd be like, "You're doing so good, buddy. You're doing so good." And years later, when he found out, he was very upset about that. But yeah, so dads, we have some unique plans, but moms have a whole different intuitive kind of sense about presence and the power of presence and how important that is. And dads are a little different. I was listening to a comedian recently, John Mulvaney, and he was talking about the difference between his dad and his mom growing up. And he's like, "I know dad loved me, but dad was like high-powered lawyer and came in, after the sun had set, and he was just always so tall, and I was on the floor with my blocks and building, and dad came in, this big towering man, and he was like, 'How are you, Tiger?' And he's like, I don't even know if he knew my name anymore. And he was like, 'And what grade are you in nowadays?' And mom would whisper, 'Third.' And he'd be like, 'And how's that going, pal?' He said, dad was such a different experience than mom. Kids pay attention, though. They see kind of how we interact, and they get that sense of kind of presence and how powerful that can be with mom. As we honor the gift of presence and we honor the gift that mothers have given us, today I want to talk a little bit about how that kind of reflects in the character of each mom that comes from God. It's one of the attributes of God, that He wants to be in our presence. And so He's inviting us, actually, to have a relationship with Him. He's not like that earthly father that you may feel disconnected from, or you may feel like is putting is trying to get away or trying to have silence or quiet or anything like that. He surpasses that. He encompasses all the best of earthly fathers, but He also encompasses all the best of the other side of creation, all of the mothers. God invites us for a deep connection. And that's what I want to focus on. We've been talking about spiritual growth in this series, and today I want to focus on how presence and being in the presence of God is powerful for growing your connection to God and also for finding your sense of purpose in life. Much like a mother's presence, a child just stares at mom, is growth-giving to her child to see that reassurance, that encouragement. So is God's presence nourishing to us. I know spiritual growth can kind of sound like a nebulous term, so let's get down to brass tacks. Let's talk about what it really means. What are we talking about when we talk about spiritual growth? And we're really talking about being grounded, right? We're talking about clarity. We're talking about renewed focus. And these are things that even those that are not church people find valuable. And I know that to be true because every January, off the charts, self-improvement, self-growth, and self-help books start flying off the shelves. New York Times list in January and February, that's all that you find at the top of that list. Other authors know not even to try to release their books during that time frame because self-help books are so popular. Anytime you go to a bookstore or a library, that section, self-help, self-improvement, whatever they call it in that certain area, tons of books. There's more of those. I went yesterday in the bookstore I go to most often. There were more of those books than there were of cookbooks. And we all got to eat all the time, right? But no, this was a huge, very long section of books because we all kind of have a sense in us of longing, of wanting to grow, of wanting to be focused more, on wanting to procrastinate less, on wanting to be grounded and not blown around by the waves of what's going on around us and not disrupted by the chaos of this world. And so that's what I want to talk about, that growth pattern today in particular. We've been talking about how to grow spiritually, and this is another aspect of that, and that is this idea of finding for ourselves kind of a pattern. Don't you want more hours in the day? Don't you want to not just survive life, but to actually savor it, to enjoy it? I mean, I think all of us at a certain level, many of us at least, have this sense that the pattern we're stuck in right now, the world, our personal lives, is not ideal. It is fallen short of the glory of God. It's not what God built for us. We have taken beauty and perfection and we've wrecked it. And we keep trying to adjust it and fix it, and every time we do, we mess it up just a little bit worse. And I saw a video the other day that I thought was hilarious. It was a group of little 8-year-olds playing soccer, in these little soccer leagues they play in. And one kid kicks the ball really hard, and it flies up and hits his own player in the face, and that kid falls down. And so as that parent starts to rush toward, it's all in slow motion, by the way. As that parent starts to rush towards that one to pick that one up, another player comes up and kicks the ball, but misses and kicks that parent in the face. And all of a sudden, it's just chaos. And the whole time, the whole video, there's a little kid just spinning in circles in the background, just in his own world. And the caption was, do you think God feels this way as our coach sometimes? You think he's just like, good Lord. Oh, good me. Do you think God just looks at us and it's just like, what on earth are they doing? He's got to be a little amused by us, right? Because we're so big and try to figure things out and be tough. And he's just like, oh, come on. You need me. You need connection with your Creator. It's easy to get caught up in the rush of this life, though. It's easy to get too busy, calendars too full, just stressed out to the max. And whether we admit it or not, we know that's not good for us. And we know it's not God's ideal for us. It's not that thriving kind of life. I think a lot of us, if I were to take an informal survey, would say, yeah, I feel like I'm surviving right now. And some of you would say, I'm halfway to surviving. I don't feel like I'm thriving. And so that's what I want to talk about today. What does it look like to thrive with God? And when the responsibilities pile up and the anxieties pile up and whirl all around you, and even when good things kind of cramp you out and make life too busy, well, how do we move forward? How do we grow? I saw this picture this week, and I thought this was kind of true of moms. So many times they're just in this midst of chaos. She's trying to shop online. She's got one kid with a bullhorn down there. She's holding one kid. And so many times moms deal with stress better than dads. And I recognized this early on. And I think it's why men build men caves or man caves so we can get away. And I think it's why we have so many outdoor hobbies. I don't think a lick of us really like the outdoors that much. I think we just have outdoor hobbies to get away from the craziness. Like golf. Really? You really enjoy golf that much? Come on. Ugh. I mean, Top Golf, I'll give you that. But golf? Come on. Who's liking that? Sitting in a deer stand for 12 hours in the cold, freezing to death? I don't believe you. I don't believe you like that. I don't believe it. No, I think we have outdoor hobbies. Working in the garage. I get it, fellas. Sorry, I'm telling all the secrets here. It's like the magician's code. But yeah, I think a lot of us don't deal with the stress really well. And so we manufacture ways to kind of get out of the stress for a little bit. But moms are just like they're like the commander, right? They're like in the middle of it. They're in the trenches and they're just like, move forward. They're like Braveheart or something. And we're kind of going, no. And so that's what I want to talk about today is in the midst of chaos, how do we find peace? How can we approach God and ask for his help to move through these difficult situations? Because we all know that chaos leads to unhappiness. Chaos leads to negative consequences for us. The more uncertain we are, the more our mind checks out. Have you ever noticed that? You ever have those nights where you can't get to sleep? I hate that. Where it's just, I tell when my mind won't shut down. I can't get it to just stop. And so I'll be up till 2 or 3, and I can't do that anymore. Like I used to be the night owl. Now I'm like 9:30 bedtime. And so when I have those horrible nights, the mind just strays. And the mind leads us into stress and worry, and it takes us away from calm and peace. And that chaos is often about things we can't control. We have zero power over. We're worrying about things that we can't even affect change of. It's just worry. But God offers us this hope. He says, be still. Be still and know that I am God. I wonder what it would be like for you to hear God saying that to you and to set aside some of that chaos and that schedule and that worry and that anxiety. And to not scroll, and to not flip, and to not flip out, but instead, to be still. And some of you are like, this is a luxury with the age of my children I do not have. You are talking about a different planet. I get that. I do. But what would it look like to take just a moment? And I'm going to offer you, I'm not saying eat a whole sheet of brownies yourself, okay? I'm saying have one brownie. Get it? Okay, I'm not saying a monastery for a year. I'm saying 10 minutes here and there. I think small things are more doable than grand plans that we fail at and never get to, okay? So I want to give you small ideas today. Take a moment. Pause and become aware of the greater presence of God around us. For Christians, this is essential. It is an essential part of our spiritual growth and development. Jesus himself taught us this way. He modeled this way. It is not optional. If you come here today not a Christ follower yet, and you are interested in this topic, there's nothing that says you can't try it on. Try it out. I would encourage you to try it out. Try this idea of pausing and being still. But it's not mandatory for you. It's mandatory for Christians. It is a part of our psyche, our ideology. It is who we are. It is to follow the way of Christ, is to follow him into this path of being able to be still in the presence of God. It is akin somewhat to recharging a battery. We are depleted, and when we get depleted, we must recharge. And this is one of the ways of spiritual growth that we recharge. Our minds tend to wander, and they tend to just drag us all over the place. And unfortunately, the landscape of media and the chaos in our world, our greater world, is not helping that at all. And it's making our minds wander. And researchers at Harvard University wanted to see what that effect was like. And so they took over 1,000 people and started tracking their daily schedules. And they came up with 250,000 data points. And they found out that our minds are wandering about 47% of the time. They surveyed people when they were at work and at home, when they were on the phone and when they were texting and when they were just in a quiet moment, when they were driving their car. They tracked all these data points. And they found that being engaged with what was right in front of you was getting disrupted about 47% of the time. They couldn't even just focus their mind on what was right in front of them, or the conversation they were having, or the program they were watching, or the class or lecture they were in. And so the researcher concluded this. Dr. Killingsworth said, mind wandering is an excellent predictor of people's happiness. His research showed that our minds when they leave the present, how often they leave the present, is a better predictor of our happiness than the activities in which we're engaged. Now, a lot of you, if I were to say, what makes you happy, you would blurt out an answer. And some of it would be outdoor stuff, and some of it would be inside stuff. Some of it would be reading. Some of you love the movies. Some of you genuinely like golf. I don't know, whatever. But whatever it is for you, you'd be like, that activity makes me really happy. But the research shows that outside of that, even, being able to focus is so much more important, because you can be on the golf course and you can be in a TV program and be distracted. Or you can be at a movie and not be able to focus. And our minds wandering is actually dangerous for us because it reduces our happiness. The higher reported happiness is the more that we can enjoy the moments that we are in right now, the present. It's a counterintuitive yet transformative solution to be present, to not worry about being all the other things, being beautiful, being smartest, being strongest, being wealthiest. Being is something we think about a lot, but what if we just thought about being present in the moment? On the surface, you're like, yeah, I know. But do you? Because if you're not doing that, then it indicates you don't have a knowledge problem, you have an application problem. And we all know that it's application, not information that leads to transformation. Information does little for us because our world is saturated in information. Literally, you can find out almost anything on YouTube or Google it, and you can figure out how to do almost anything. You may not want to do it, but you can figure out how to do just about anything. The information is free, flowing, it's there. The application, which leads to real transformation, that's the most difficult part. Mothers, and as we celebrate Mother's Day, many times walk into a room and bring a calm to the chaos. I remember trying to comfort one of my children one time, and he's just blaring like a siren. His face was red, and I was like, "It's okay, there. Good luck with all that." That's kind of how I was. I was trying to be, me holding a kid is not the same thing as my wife holding a kid. And so, like, there. Okay, all right. We about done? Kind of asking him, and he's just blaring. And then she walks in, and she's, "Just give him to me." And quiet. And I'm like, that stinks. I'm going to go make a hobby outside real quick. But anyway, yeah, so there was a difference in the calming nature I noticed with my children. And, if I let them tell you, they would tell you all the terrible things I said to them growing up. They'd fall down and hurt themselves, and I'd be like, walk it off. I would say something my dad taught me. Too far from your heart to kill you. Come on. Rub some dirt in it. I had a lot of compassion for my kids, but I'd be like, you're fine. But Dad, I'm bleeding. Yeah, well, that's what Band-Aids are for. I always had a solution, but I was never real like, oh no. And so that was not compassion many times that they were looking for. And there's a gift to noticing those things. People talk to me, and boy, you talk to me very long, and you get a sense very quickly that I don't notice things very often. Did you see what they were wearing? I have no clue. Did you see those shoes? Did you see the color of the dress? There was a dress. What? I don't know. I don't know how I'm so blind to like my what's going on around me, but I would be a terrible on a court case because they'd be like, "And what color was the car?" And I'm like, "What? What car? What?" So the fact that moms can notice those things and call those things out speaks again to their level of presence. And presence changes chaos. When presence comes into chaos, it has this like nullifying a factor to it. Just like with my son, he's just blaring and screaming, and I'm like, And she walks in and picks him up, and it's just like the presence just, it's like a hush comes over the room. You get that sense a couple times in the New Testament when Jesus enters the space, that you get a sense that the air changes. You get a sense that there's this calm, that somehow people had this sense, even though they didn't know what they really had. Even the apostles didn't really get a full, Jesus was telling the information, but they had not been transformed yet. They didn't fully get who Jesus was and what he was prepared to do and how far God was going to go to bring us back to himself. And you get that sense that Jesus walks in and everything changes. Like the heaviness in the room lifts and there's a fresh air. The presence changes. And inasmuch as you and I are made in the image of God and we enter spaces where we can be a calming presence in the chaos, we take a little bit of that with us. We take some of that presence with us. What if we were to give our worries and our cares to God and to say, I am incapable of carrying that burden. All of the things I'm worried about, all of the things that are worrying me today. But I can go to God and he cares about me. Give all your worries and cares to God, for he cares about you. You know how big that is? Like all the other religions out there talk about this idea of you should care about the gods. You should burn incense or bring money to this altar or burn this certain incense, or you should go to this certain place, or you pray in this certain direction. You should be concerned about the gods. You ought to be scared, you little peon. That's what almost every religion says. How opposite is this? God cares about you. He's concerned about what you're concerned about. You're on the top of his mind. He loves you. He cares about you. So you can give your worries and your cares to God. That's huge. Now, it is true. We are tiny little specks flying through outer space on this rotating rock. We are very minute compared to all of creation. And I think that lends itself to even more emphasis that the fact that God sees you and cares about you and loves you and specifically proves it in that he will listen to you. You can pray and he hears you. That's just mind-blowing that God cares about us on that level. All of your narcissism, all of your worries, all of your silly little stresses, all of that little soccer game I described, all the ridiculousness, God loves that. He loves you. He cares about you. He wants to hear from you. He wants relationship with you. The things that you might come to me and I'm worried about this and I would say, good luck with all that. God is like, no, there's no such thing as luck. I love you. He wants to spend eternity with you knowing, and think about what you know in your mind about yourself that you don't want anyone else to know. He still loves you. He knows that. You may have secrets you're taking to your grave. God knows all that and still wants to spend eternity with you. That's mind-blowing to me. I love what Pastor Warren said one time. He said, God loves each of us as if there were only one of us. He loves each of us as if you were the only creation on earth. He loves you that intensely. So if God notices us this much, maybe we should take notice of him. Maybe this is our sign. There's your sign. We should take notice of a God who notices us this much. And this is the last point. Noticing what's going on around us. I mentioned that I'm a terrible noticer. I'm just bad. I'm trying to get better. But Psalm 46:10 here gives us this idea that if we will just be still, we'll start to notice more things. We'll start to just bask in the beauty of creation and in the awesomeness of the relationships of the people that God's put in our life and in the relationship with God himself. Looking around, slowing down, paying attention. Be still and know that I am God. There's two things here that are happening. Number one, be still. Self-explanatory. I think you've gotten it. I've said it 3 times. I think you've gotten it, the information. But now we've got to look at transformation. How do we apply this? How can this change our life? Because look at the result of it. Number 2, you'll know that he's God. You'll enjoy the presence of God. You'll calm your mind. These are very beneficial. This is the exact thing they just found out at Harvard in 2018 with the mind study. This has been since the psalmist wrote this. Yeah, calming your mind leads to better outcomes, leads to happiness. Isn't that interesting? Thousands of years ago, this wisdom literature is written down that God is speaking to us saying, be still. I'm going to give you 3 ideas. Little brownies, not the whole pan, all right? Little brownies. Take one. Everybody take one. I feel like I'm having to. Everybody take one. Because I think it would be so powerful you applied one of these ideas this week. I think if you try them all, or you try some big grand plan, it's not going to happen. But try one that works for you. First of all, I think this is a great way to focus. I enjoy this, and I think it flows really well with those of you that are in our Bless program where we're trying to bless our neighbors, is to walk your neighborhood. Just to go for a walk, 10 minutes, and as you do this, do something specific with your walk. You're not, worried about how many steps you get in. You're not worried about what your heart rate is. You're just walking, okay? You're getting out in nature a little bit, and notice the cars. Notice the houses. Notice the people that are out and about. Notice nature. Notice the air and the scent. You Okies that are natives, we know when it's about to rain, right? Rain today. And I have learned that others outside of our state think that we're very weird because of that. Or, I don't like the color of the sky. And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, I lived here long enough. I know a storm's coming. But imagine if you could just walk out for 10 minutes and enjoy that moment. What if you prayed for some of the homes? Those of you in the Bless program, you're getting prayer requests on a regular basis from the 40 homes right around you. And so what if you were praying for those homes? I found this very powerful. Occasionally on a walk, I'll come across someone I've been praying for. It's really cool. So you're going to see some neighbors out. Most of the time you're not. You're going to see nature, cars. You're going to see your neighborhood. but just a walk, just for 10 minutes, just to get a little bit of peace. Idea number 2 is to journal. Some of you love journaling, some of you hate it. Here's my encouragement to you, if this is what you want to try. Don't do 20 minutes. Do 2 to 3 minutes of journaling, 2 to 3 things that you're thankful for today. I love what the Christian mystic Meister Eckhart wrote one time. He said, if the only prayer you ever say is thank you, that will be enough. I just love that thought. I think so many times we try to make these big prayers that are very bold and sound religious-y or something like that. And what if we just said, thank you, God? He said, that'd be plenty. That prayer is sufficient. So don't worry about the words of the prayer. God just wants to communicate with you. It's like a lot of moms today are hoping for a phone call or a text message or a card in the mail or some kind of communication across the United States. They're hoping for that communication. God is just waiting for us to pick up the phone. He's just waiting on us to pray. And it doesn't have to be long. It can be thank you. That's huge. So journal. What are you grateful for? Some of you like paper and pen. Some of you would rather do it in the Notes app. Take a moment and do that. And the last idea is just to pause. And this is simple. 5 minutes you can do this. Just do nothing. That's what being still is, right? It's doing nothing. Some of you are like, I can do nothing really well. No, I don't believe you. This is no Netflix nothing, right? This is no scroll nothing, no Instagram nothing, no music in my ears nothing, no worrying about other things, nothing. Pause. Don't even try to think deep thoughts. Just exist. Thank you. Pray. But if we start small, and I put coffee up there, I know it's not a picture of prayer, you're like, why has he got coffee? Because coffee's my favorite way to pause, right? Take a drink and just, whew. I love going to bookstores that have cafes. I love going to cafes. If you ask me to go to coffee, I will go to coffee. I like coffee. And I like to just sit. Because it does, the drive-through coffee experience is very different from sitting down in a coffee shop. And you're getting the same caffeine hit, I guess, but it's totally weird. It's a different experience than being able to just calmly reflect and spend time in that moment. And the reason I think it's important to start small is I think we might actually do it if we start small. I think if we start really big, we might not do it. So try one short practice daily or weekly. I think that's way better than failing at a long, ambitious plan. And here's what the result would be. What if we could do what Paul said here to the Philippian church? Don't worry about anything. Anybody there yet? I don't know. This is crazy to me. This is crazy talk. I'm like, it's in the Bible, so it must be important. But I'm like, wow, who can do this? What powerful, powerful contentment and resolve and being still this is. And this is the goal. Because you know how this is the goal? This is the goal that God created us for originally. So everything else we draw into this life, worry and stress and anxiety, that's not from God. That's man-made. Paul says, look, don't worry about anything. Instead, just pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank him for all he has done. So we see a connection here between the New Testament, this is fairly recent, last 2,000 years, writing of Paul to the Philippians, with 6,000 years old wisdom literature. We're connecting Old Testament and New Testament. We're connecting the ideas. It's the exact same thought. Tell God what you need. Thank him for what he's done. And then you will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything we can understand. That's the kind of peace I want. The kind of peace I want is something that I can't describe to you. I can't write it down. I can't say, here's the 10 easy steps and then go sell a book on Amazon for a self-help book. Can't do that because it goes beyond what we can even comprehend. God's peace will guard your hearts and minds as you live in Christ Jesus. This is what we want for you. This is what Coffee Creek wants for you. It's what we want for our neighbors. It's what we want for your coworkers. It's what we want for our entire community, your family. We want people to experience God's peace. Less chaos, more peace, more comfort, more stillness, more presence. if you're curious, or you want to know more, you want to go deeper, there's a couple buttons on the app there. If you're curious about Jesus, you're like, today I've talked about it, and you're like, I want to know more. I've got a small course, texting course. I send you emails and texts where I'll talk about the book of John and talk to you about who Jesus is. It's free to you. You can click that button if you want to know more about that. If you want to go deeper into this week, I'm going to walk deeper into the be still concept, and that button there, you can click that button and get a part of that. You'll get 3 texts this week from me about being still, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and we'll walk through that idea. But the big idea for today is that when we are still, when we be still, we get to witness God's grace. We see his goodness. We see his glory more clearly. In a world that's very difficult to see that because of how chaotic it is and how traumatic our world is, when we can calm and we can be still, we get to see God working. And this is where we find grounding for ourselves. This is where we find focus. This is where we find purpose. This is where we find spiritual growth. As we begin in a chaotic world to be still, to notice God's goodness, and to experience his peace that goes beyond all understanding.